The most wonderful time of the year is finally here upon us. And no, I know it's holiday season, but I'm not referring to the holidays. Although I do want to wish you guys, to everybody that's tuned in, to everybody that will tune in, happy holidays. Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah. And if I missed any other holidays out there, I apologize. Last but not least, happy early new year. Cheers to 2022. With that aside, week 15 is here. That means the fantasy football playoffs are finally here. Man, where did all that time go? I feel like I just started the season yesterday, and here we are in the fantasy football playoffs, where legacies are made, championships are won, victories are attained, and so forth. For those of you that are familiar or that have been rocking with us for a while now, you might be familiar with our fantasy football segment from last year, Steezy Sleepers, in which we highlighted sleepers of the week every single week, and unfortunately, we weren't able to continue that this time around. So because of that, I would like to make it up to y'all with this episode. How to dominate your fantasy football playoffs with these 3 tips. But before we continue, for those of you guys that are new to tuning in and you're seeing a guy with a suit talking fantasy football, you might be asking yourself, what kind of credibility does he have? Okay, well, let me answer that for you. Not that I feel a need to have to tell you guys about my fantasy football credibility, but I'm a little proud of myself, and so forgive me if I'm showing off a little bit, but I do like to consider myself a fantasy football veteran. I've been in the game for 10 plus years now. I started when I was in 7th grade. And so fast forward 10, 12, 11 years later, and here I am, fresh at 23 years old, still playing fantasy football, and I'm having the most fun that I've ever had. And for the first time ever, I partook in more than 10 leagues. This year, I partook in 14 leagues, and guess what? I'm going to the playoffs in all 14. For the first time this year, I partook in a couple of Superflex leagues. I've been participating in 16-team leagues, 14-team leagues, 10-team leagues, 12-team leagues, 8-team leagues, 20-team leagues. And so I've been in leagues of all sizes. I've been in all sorts of different leagues with different sort of scoring rules. And so you can pretty much ask me anything in regards to fantasy football. I can tell you what it is. I can give you a game. And not only that, I do have, 4, 5, maybe a couple of championship rings under my belt. And so for those of you guys that are interested in asking or that are in need of any more fantasy football advice, please feel free to follow us on Instagram and send us your DMs, send us your questions, send them via Twitter at SteezySmith, Snapchat at SteezySmith. I'd be happy to answer each and every single one of your guys' fantasy football questions, as I know how important fantasy football playoff season really is. Now that we got that taken care of, if that sounds interesting, let's hop right in, shall we?
Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah, here comes the.
You want to carry 2 defenses / special teams unit heading into the postseason. And now for all my fantasy football aficionados out there, you might be asking yourself, or actually maybe you're not asking yourself this, but there are going to be some people asking yourself, why? Why would I want to carry 2 defenses heading into the playoffs? Why waste a roster spot on 2 defenses / special teams? Well, I'll tell you why. Why? Because if you're like me and you stream defenses, right? You want to take advantage of the best possible matchups available. Let's say, for example, this week, right? I added the Dallas Cowboys defense, who have been on a tear as of late, because not only are they playing a backup quarterback in Mike Glennon of the New York Giants, but they're also playing one of the worst offenses in football. Not only that, they're also one of the hottest defenses. And so not only do they have a plus matchup, they're also on a tear. They've been hot recently, and I want to go with the hot hand. On top of that, you can't start everyone in the playoffs. And so you might have a deep bench. You might have a bunch of high floor, low ceiling guys on your bench. But if we're being realistic, when are you going to start those guys? And so if you have, and no offense and no disrespect to any of these players whatsoever, but if you have a solid floor, but not a very high ceiling type of player, and let's say a Jarvis Landry, for example, if you're loaded at the wide receiver spots, when do you really envision yourself starting a Jarvis Landry type player? When injuries arise? I mean, you could wait until the injuries arise, and you could wait to find, a replacement in the waiver wire, but I'd much rather have another defense on tap. Even if they don't have the best matchup this week, what if they have a plus matchup next week? For example, I know this is a couple weeks down the line. I'm rostering the Seattle Seahawks defense and in the best teams that I have across my 14 leagues. Why? Because in week 17, they're playing at home against the lowly 1-win Detroit Lions football team, who might be without some starters in TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift. Not only is Seattle still making a final push to enter the postseason dance, but that defense has been one of the best in terms of scoring defenses in all the National Football League. Pair them in the championship game against the Detroit Lions offense, I think you're going to get that competitive edge that a lot of owners are going to need come fantasy football playoff time. Once you're in the fantasy football playoffs, a lot of rosters are going to be stacked. A lot of rosters are going to be star-studded. A lot of rosters are going to look similar in terms of star power, in terms of how many points they're able to put up on any given week. So as a fantasy football owner, as a general manager, you want to exploit and you want to be able to find those little advantages that can give you an edge in any given week. Now, like I said, the quarterbacks might be equal, the running backs and the wide receivers in terms of going up head to head with whoever you're going up against in week 15, 16, 17, and so forth. And so you could find that potential edge in streaming a defense, maybe even streaming a kicker. The same rule applies to kickers, and if you stream quarterbacks and tight ends, depending on the sort of league that you're in, then you could possibly do that. But I highly recommend stashing and having multiple defenses that you're confident in and starting for the rest of the fantasy football playoffs. And I know the fantasy football playoffs are one and done, and so you can't expect to be, in the championship round when you're just now entering round one, but have a couple of defenses that you're comfortable in using. For example, here are my favorites for not only this week, but for 16, 17, and beyond. Favorable matchups in week 15 include, like I just mentioned earlier, the Dallas Cowboys defense at the New York Giants, the Houston Texans defense at the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been awful as of late. They haven't scored 20 points since week 6, and they've just been in complete disarray. We don't know what's going on with Urban Meyer. Trevor Lawrence looks broken. He's playing in a fire right now, and I know the Houston Texans also happen to be vying for the worst team in the NFL alongside the Jacksonville Jaguars, but their defense has shown a few flashes this season, and I could see them potentially rewarding owners that are willing to take a roll of the dice on the Houston Texans. And so that's definitely a defense that I'd recommend. Another defense that I like in week 15, the Cardinals defense, who are going up against the lowly 1-win Detroit Lions in Detroit. There's also the Dolphins defense going up against the New York Jets, and they're also riding high, riding their own winning streak. And the Jets, they're going to be without Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Michael Carter. Yes, he's coming back, but that Jets offense has been completely abysmal all year long. I have no faith in them. The Dolphins defense, meanwhile, is not only returning to form that they displayed last year, but they're looking to make a final playoff push. Add the Dolphins defense. Favorable matchups in week 16 include, yet again, the Dallas Cowboys defense going up against the Washington football team. We got the Chargers defense going up against the lowly Houston Texans. And last but not least, for week 16, we got the Chiefs defense going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers have a ton of talent on offense, but the Chiefs defense is another defense that has been very hot as of late. They're able to score on special teams. They're able to score on turnovers. They get sacks, and they've been holding opponents to very low point totals. And so while the Pittsburgh Steelers offense do feature a great a bevy of skill position players, they're about middle of the pack in terms of scoring points. And so I like the Chiefs defense in week 16. And moving on to week 17, which is probably going to be the championship round for a lot of teams in the fantasy football playoffs. Like I just said, the Seattle Seahawks defense will be a perfect defense to have if you so happen to get that far. Another defense that I like, the 49ers defense going up against the Houston Texans, the Patriots defense, the number one defense in most fantasy football leagues going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, what else do I have to add there? Last but not least, the Buccaneers defense up against the abysmal Jets offense. I think these are all plus matchups, and I think these are all defenses that if you don't already have, or if another league mate doesn't already have them, look to get them on your roster today. Now, optimize your bench, and by that I mean fill your bench up with handcuffs. Fill your bench up with handcuffs to players that are injury prone. Fill your bench with not just these low ceiling, solid floor bench type of guys, not guys that you haven't started all year. Fill up your bench with players that, if given the opportunity to start for their respective football teams, could do damage and could pay dividends for your fantasy football team, especially in the most intense time of the year. And you also want to get guys that have a high ceiling, guys that have been hot, guys that have been on a tear as of late, guys that have been getting more playing time, guys that have been playing more snaps. And so a few players to look out for, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. We know they're not really going to be playing competitively against any opponent down the stretch of the season, and so there's going to be a lot of volume. They're going to be passing a lot. They're going to be behind a lot. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be the primary beneficiary. I mean, TJ Hawkinson, we don't know if he's going to come back. DeAndre Swift, is he going to be shut down for the rest of the year? Jamal Williams, is he going to be activated in time off the COVID list? We don't know. And so Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a guy that I've been high on since the jump, and he's finally starting to produce. And so who knows? Maybe he could produce in the most important time of the year for your roster. If you have empty IR roster spots, why not exhaust them? Why not exhaust all the spots on your roster? I know Derrick Henry probably isn't going to come back in time to help your fantasy football team, but let's say someone dropped him and he's available and you have an open IR spot. Let's say Calvin Ridley is still available and you have an open IR spot. Let's say you have multiple IR spots. I'm not saying you have to rely or that you pick up these guys thinking that they're going to help produce for your team, but I mean, you have those empty IR spots for a reason, and so why not use them? I mean, obviously, if one of your starters, if one of your key bench players do suffer an injury within the next couple of weeks, then yeah, drop the Derrick Henrys of the world, drop the Calvin Ridleys, whoever else is on the reserve list, take advantage of those IR spots. You never know if they could eventually end up becoming useful. I mean, Derrick Henry, yes, let's say he comes back week 18 or is set to come back week 18 or maybe even before that, he's going to be rusty come playoff time. Even if the Titans do lock up a playoff spot, maybe they want to get him some action, you know, week 17, week 18, we just never really know. And so if you have those open roster spots, those open IR spots, let's exhaust them. Guys that I would also target as handcuffs would be Sony Michel for the LA Rams. Darrell Henderson has a checkered injury history. Another guy, Mark Ingram of the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara has missed a couple of games this year. Devontae Booker of the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley hasn't exactly personified what it means to be an Iron Man or what it means to be healthy in the National Football League, and so Devontae Booker is a guy that I'd like to stash on my bench. Marlon Mack of the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor is all of a sudden injury prone or anything like that, but let's say he does go down and you have a Jonathan Taylor. Well, you want to have his backup, because obviously we've seen what Marlon Mack has done in this league before. He has a 1,000-yard season on his belt, and the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in football, and so if Jonathan Taylor, knock on wood, he is on a few of my teams, if he were to go down, well, now you have the next Indianapolis Colts starter at running back. Obviously, I'm not vouching or asking for players to get injured. That's just something you don't do. I mean, you don't wish for players to get injured. That's weird. But that aside, Alexander Mattison, Justin Jackson, backup running back for the LA Chargers. Austin Eckler has done a great job of staying relatively healthy this year, and so but we just never know. I mean, we've seen him get injured in the past, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to roster a Justin Jackson. Another guy I like, Jeff Wilson Jr., running back for the San Francisco 49ers. I have a lot of shares of Elijah Mitchell, and I've seen some of the injuries he had to deal with. And so that's why I've rostered Jeff Wilson Jr. in some of my leagues. He's another guy that you want to keep your eyes on as we head towards the final stretch of the fantasy football playoffs. Pay attention to the NFL landscape as well as the landscape of your own league. I know it might sound simple, but if you don't know what's going on around the NFL or even what's going on in your own league, how can you attack the waiver wire as diligently as possible without knowing, you know, who's gotten on the COVID list, who's getting injured, who is getting demoted, who's being placed on IR, who isn't going to play in this game, or who... There's so many different variables to consider. And so if you're not up to date with the latest news around the NFL, around your own league, and what I mean by the landscape of your own league, let's say a league mate dropped a player that you've always had an eye on. If you weren't paying attention to what was going on in your league, you wouldn't ever know until you were to go on the waiver wire, let's say the next day. But let's say someone else put in a waiver claim for said player. You just lost out on your opportunity. And so yes, again, I know it sounds simple, but you want to keep up to date with the latest. I mean, especially with all these COVID cases rising, we have so many different players contracting COVID or just testing positive. Who knows? Maybe a lot of these are false positives and whatnot, but you have to know what's going on around the NFL and in your league if you're to attack the waiver wire as diligently as possible. Now is the time of year in which money's on the line, legacies are on the line, championships are on the line, pride is on the line, bragging rights is on the line. And so if you're not paying attention to what's going on, if you're not watching the games, if you're not reading what's going on, if you're not paying attention, or if you're not following reporters and whatnot on social media, how can you really optimize your chances of winning the fantasy football championship? I just don't know what to tell you. I mean, luck, yes, luck does play a factor. Luck does play a part in fantasy football championships being won or not being won. But you want to do your own part, do your research, do your homework. If even for 10 to 15 minutes a day, just follow up, look up NFL latest news, stuff like that, whatever's trending. As far as the NFL world goes, I mean, you just want to keep up to date. You want to stay knowledgeable. You want to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the rest of your competition. All that being aside, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want more fantasy football playoff tips, if you guys want more fantasy football content, be sure to let us know down in the comment section below, or you guys can send us a DM on Instagram, Twitter, @SteezySmith. Send us your thoughts. Let us know if you have any start-sit questions. Let us know if you have any questions on, whether or not you want to drop this guy for that guy, or if you want to add this guy, or if you're stuck between defenses or kickers, or if you're streaming different positions. Let us know. I want to hear it. While that marks the end of this video, we got loads of other content for y'all. We are going to be dropping another Seahawks video, hopefully in the next couple of days. And who knows, maybe we might even keep dropping fantasy football videos as the fantasy football season progresses and as it nears its end. Again, happy holidays, y'all. Ain't nothing but love for you guys. As always, all glory to God. Stay tuned for the next one. Team Steezy all the way. Team Steezy forever. And Steezy out. Also forgot to add, I know the pro football season is coming to a close. Don't forget to use your favorite sports site at BetUS. Be sure to use our promo code in all caps, Steezy, STEEZY. The link will be down in the description below for you to receive a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit on up to $2,500 today. Let's not just win fantasy football championships. Let's get you some free cash. That's it, y'all. None but love. Again, this video is going to be dedicated to Mr. Todd Nas. While that concludes this video, we have loads of other content. You don't have to stop watching there. Other content on our channel homepage, as well as our social media platforms. And again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for us. Tell a friend and tell a friend. Nothing but love, and Steezy out.